This is the story of Toguro. Toguro was a martial artist back in the day. We're talking 50 years prior to the Dark Tournament with Yusuke, and his team fighting against Togoro's team. And he had a partner. Her name was Genkai. They ran around and they fought demons. They were, practitioners of martial arts, and they made a great team. Toguro always, was like, one day, he says, one day we'll grow old and we'll die. It's like we're here long enough to know what we want. But then once we know what we want, it's like, it's just fleeting. Our lives as human beings, and he started to realize this as, they, fought demons and they did it for a long time together. Um, and that kind of, waned on him a little bit. Um, that they wouldn't be, what they are now, later on in the future, but then other things happened too. Tragedy struck. Um, a demon named Kyron, attacked um his pupils. See, he had students of his, dojo, and he wasn't strong enough to protect them, and they died. He was requested to go to the Dark Tournament. He had a team. Him, Genkai, and some other guys. They were never named or anything. Um, they eventually won the Dark Tournament. He defeated Kyron in the tournament, too, the demon that fucking killed his students. However, in the winning of the Dark Tournament, right, he had a choice. Like, what wish do you want? We'll grant you a wish. He said, make me a demon of the highest class, one that has a body that won't age and with strength absolute. And from that moment on, the girl was a demon. And he ran around causing havoc, basically. Finding strong opponents, strong demons to fight against, and just killing them, boom, 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 just killing these demons off, you know, for years. Genkai retreated to the forest, and she was, a psychic. After that, 50 years have passed, and Yusuke Urameshi came up on Toguro. Toguro was under, higher. He was for higher. Under, no, from Tarukane. See, Tarukane is a underground boss. See, he's a part of the Black Club. These animals or these fucked up people, they bet on, demons killing each other and whatnot. I bet this demon's gonna beat this demon. Let's see them tear each other apart. Let's bid our money on this shit. Because we're billionaires and millionaires and we just, got money. We might as well, bet on, fucked up shit like this. Whose monster's gonna win? And they did shit like that. However, this time it was about who's gonna invade Tarukane's compound, who's gonna come out of the top between Yusuke and Kuwabara, and then Toguro, the Toguro brothers. As Toguro did have an older brother with him too. He used him as a sword, and he was fighting against Kuwabara for a while, and Yusuke. They were able to defeat him. However, Toguro played games. Um, Toguro learned how to, over the years of being a demon and whatnot, how to like regulate his energy. What I'm saying here is he was holding back. He only used about 30-20% of his power against Yusuke and Kuwabara. So they thought they had won that fight, but Toguro got up, afterwards, after Yusuke left and everything else, and he killed Tarukane, the guy who hired him to watch over and protect him from Urameshi, because Urameshi was trying to save Yukina, an ice apparition who was actually Yeah, sister. But he, um, then was like, okay, I want him for the dark tournament. I want to see him again. That boy has, promised, this guy, like, what I'm saying is, he is a guy who's worth fighting. He could give me the fight I want if pushed, right. And like, I don't know, a week later or something, he showed up again. Yusuke was like, "What the fuck? This guy. I'm pretty sure I like killed you." And he was like, "No. I allowed you to think that. You're a bit, naive or something to like what my true power is." He showed him 40%. He took him to a parking lot and destroyed the parking lot. One of those parking lots that has levels and shit, right? He destroyed it, leveled it to the ground. And then, Yusuke was like, damn, this guy was like holding back on me, and he's still holding back on me. And I'm kind of, like fearful of it. Like, basically, he didn't know if he could win right then and there. But Toguro was like, you are invited to the Dark Tournament as a special guest. You show up or we kill everybody you know, and um, he was like, and Yusuke was like, I'll be there. And Toguro was like, okay. He goes and he does that, right? And then, the tournament starts. The Dark Tournament's also ran by the Black Co. These, wealthy people have demons that, fight for them. Like, I bet that my team will beat your team and other things. The tournament committee. Um, the Dark Tournament was really set for, Team Urameshi to go through all the rounds. What I'm trying to say here is, it was stacked against Team Urameshi, and Toguro was like witnessing this. Will he even make it to like fight me in the finals? Because like we'll only be in like about two bouts before the finals, but they had to fight against Rikuyu Kai, um, the Garaki team. They had to fight against the Shinobi of Spirit World. They had to fight against Kiryu Togi team. They had to fight like more rounds than everybody else. And they eventually came out on top. But like he watched the whole time, and he was like, Urameshi's progressing and other things. However, I still don't think he's tough enough to fight against me. And he witnessed these people like playing games with him. Um, the tournament committee is full of all these assholes who have money and other things, and they like wanted their team to win. And like out of all the teams there, Team Urameshi was a team that had humans on it. Yusuke and Kubara and Genkai. Hiei and Karama, but then they didn't like him there. They're like, let's get rid of these weak ass animals, you know, because they're like, okay, this is a tournament for demons, and then I don't like to see my team lose to mere humans. That one looked good for me, and I have a lot of money invested in this. They were always trying to like fuck their team over, disqualifying people for you know or they can't fight in this round because they took too much damage in the last round. Shit like that. You know, technicalities and whatnot. You know, if these people don't show up, then this team automatically wins. But like all the while, they're like trying to keep these people from entering the fight. You know, and then when they do come back, they're disqualified for fighting in the next round. All kind of shit was, being played. Tagoro eventually killed everybody who was like in the tournament committee. He was like, these people are like fucking around too much. Like, I want to see him like, progress and get stronger. So like, I have somebody who's like worthy of fighting, but we don't have to like run this bullshit on him. I do want to like meet him in the finals if he can get there. without people like playing too many fucking games. And Toguro basically sat there and watched, and then they had their own um, bouts too that they fought in. You know, they only fought in like 2 rounds, so they were in the semifinal round, and then like a round before that, they had destroyed this group. Like he actually did it himself. He went in the ring and he destroyed like 5 people, like basically blew their guts out. And it was an easy, like flawless victory. People in the stands were like, "Damn!" Eventually too, um, like the other guys on the team showed their prowess and shit. People got scared. They were like, if Team Euromatch fighting them, boy, they gonna lose. All these demons were saying shit like that. Togoro's gonna fucking like, end these motherfuckers. Um, he was doing that, and it came time for the semifinals, and eventually Genkai came out, and he was like, "That's Genkai." She's a girl who didn't want to. He caused what I did. She became an old bitch basically, and went and like hid in the fucking woods for like 50 years. Killing demons here and there and honing her skills as a psychic. Whereas I became a more powerful demon, and like all you fucking demons here fear me and my power. You know, I don't know what you have in store, but you better have trained him up right. She they actually met up in the forest. Before the final started. She had given her powers to Yusuke, spirit or power. Um, and that power was enough to like put Yusuke on par with Toguro. Um, but like I said, they went and they settled things. He was like, "You were a coward. You turned yourself into a demon because you couldn't handle the fact that you weren't powerful enough to defend your students. When Chiron came in there to kill him, and you became essentially what you hated, and now you want an opponent who's strong enough to defeat you. You know, because you're now that demon too. Causing fucking problems for people." And he's like, "I had the guts to obtain power, and while you got the guts to like get old and rot away." And he killed her. And it was kind of sad because he did like love her at some point in his life, but at that point he was just about the fight between Yusuke. It didn't matter. Either he was gonna die or Yusuke was gonna die the next day. And Yusuke got there, but he got there too late. And tried to fight him, but then he's like, "I'll see you tomorrow in the ring." And then it got time for that part, right? The finals came around, and Toguro is ready to fight against Yusuke once Hiei won his bout. Karama won his, but technicalities and whatnot. And they actually got the points. Then Kuwabara won his bout with Togoro's older brother. Then it came down to Yusuke and Toguro. See, Toguro was fighting him well, and like he had the upper hand, and then Yusuke took off his spirit cuffs, and Toguro was like, "Damn, you were playing games with me, boy. Like I'm still like only at like 50%. You should have known that you had to take those fucking restraints off to actually defeat me. You can't keep them on expecting to win." And he's like, "Yeah, I figured, but I still had to try anyways." And then he took him off, and he started fighting him, and then he shot him with the spirit gun. Spirit gun did take him out of the stadium, but he came back. When he came back, he was in 90% form. And then 90% form, he was like durable strength, like went way the fuck up. And Yusuke was like, "What the fuck? This guy's a fucking monster. You know, like I can't even damage this guy." And he was even like flicking like air bullets at him, like, and he had to block them, and then eventually he actually almost broke Yusuke's arm too. And he was actually able to, like, when he went full form, like full power, he was like able to like summon like fucking phantoms from his like these holes on his fucking like shoulders and shit. Like he became a fucking true demon. Like it wasn't apparent, too apparent. Um, like he still looked like a human kind of, but then like when he went full power, he was like gone. Like Toguro was like a true monster. You know what he like wanted. You know from the tournament committee. You know its full power was on display there and there. You know, and people in the stands were dying. Well, demons in the stands were dying, and you know Kurama and he had to put up their energy to like keep like phantoms at bay from like killing them. Um, and like Botan put up barriers, Kurama put up barriers and shit. You know, it was getting crazy. Um, and then you know Yusuke was like, okay, well, you know. Well, he was like, well, Tagoro was like, well, I have to make you, you know, motivate you. I have to kill all your friends in front of you. He said, what? You know, I ain't gonna let that happen, you know, and then he got his head smashed in the ground. And then, you know, Genkai, you know, came through inside of, she took over Pooh's body. That little bird and stuff, you know, yeah. Yusuke Spirit Beast. And she's like, yo, what the hell are you doing? You know, and he was like, yo, that's Genkai. You know, she was like, you know, you are slacker still. Boy, you have to like get out there and like not play games anymore. You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for, you know, your friends. And he's like, I know, but it's easier said than done. You know, this motherfucker is like on other like this guy's not a, you know, bitch. You know, he's the most toughest, you know, I couldn't even damage him. You know, she's like, don't do shit like that. Don't sleep on yourself. You know, and don't become, you know, weak like him. You know, be strong for your friends and shit. You know, that's what you have to do. And he got a pep talk from her, but it wasn't enough. So Kuwabara got the bright idea to act like he died. Um, because Yusuke lied about, you know, Genkai's death, or didn't tell Kuwabara about Genkai's death. You know, thinking it would affect him too much during the tournament and other things. So he played that role. Tagoro went up on him and like, you know, looked like he had killed him. And then Yusuke got angry, and he, you know, ended up defeating Tagoro with a spirit gun. Um, he stood on that fucking spirit gun too. Like he didn't move this time. Like when he popped out that full powered spirit gun, Yusuke didn't move him. Like he just stood there and took the blast. Like he didn't move too too far. Like he didn't push him far back or anything. He just stood there and like basically, you know, it was like he didn't like tank it though, because like it looked as though he did, but then all of a sudden he like shattered, and like basically his muscles tore apart, like in a nasty fucking way. Like oh my god, like, I don't know how it looked in the manga, but you know in the anime it looked pretty fucking nasty. Chikuro's dead body laying on the ground. And he was like, you know, you finally, you know, won. You know, you defeated me, a beast. Then, you know, he was there at, you know, Spirit World, and Kawama was like, you know, you weren't that bad of a person before you became a demon. And even when you were a demon, you fought against demons. You weren't fucking with human beings that much. You know, a light punishment will like suffice. You don't have to go to hell or purgatory or anything like that. Tagoro was like, you know what? Send me to purgatory. And he's like, but you'll be there for eternity, and somebody like you know, don't deserve shit like that. And he was like, no, my decision's my decision. And he went there, and you know, he said goodbye to Genkai, and he was like, you know, if I would have done the right thing and not became a monster, you know, we could have lived a life together and had fun. But you know, my dumbness and other things. And he went and he like, you know, basically went to purgatory and died, or not died because he was already dead, but he spent eternity in purgatory. But that's the story of Tagoro, you know, sad and other things, but you know, he wasn't all bad, you know, he just had a past that was, you know, fucked up, and it got to him and other things. You know, he at least got to say goodbye to Genkai, and you know, she got brought back to life, you know, because he didn't really mean to kill her. You know, it was his, you know, he became the thing he didn't want to become, but he became it because, you know, he allowed things to get to him too much. And Toguro is, you know, household name in that franchise, right? As far as the villain goes, everybody talks about Toguro, you know. But that's Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho, his life. Stay cool, around the corner for some more um, story times as well.